Hi everybody. I'm just looking over this week's work and I thought I would post a video quickly just answering a few questions here. So these are the questions for this week, chapters 1 through 6. And I'm going to skip this one, give 5 facts about the Igbo people that you found surprising. You can all answer that. There's a background page on them. And also, of course, things that you can glean from the chapters themselves. But we can look at these and see how you might answer these relating to chapters 1 through 6. So just to give a quick background, a quick summary, chapters 1 through 6 are the beginning of the novel. Remember, the title of this is Things Fall Apart, and it's dealing with post-colonialism, so obviously there will be some aspect of colonization here. But as you can see, I think, at the beginning, that is not the case. There is no colonial influence in these chapters, at least not directly on these people. They may hear rumors, but they have never encountered somebody who is an outsider. But you do get to see a lot of their culture, and I think one of the things that Achebe, his name is Chinua Achebe, the author, I think one of the things that Achebe is trying to do here is show you the complexity of the Igbo culture that existed before Africans were colonized by Europeans. And we can see they have a legal system, they have festivals, they have punishments for wrongdoing, they have a lot of different ways to organize their society, which are not the same as ours, but it is a complex society. It's not something that's really simple and primitive. And you really get introduced to Okonkwo as a person. Okonkwo absolutely is something of a tragic hero here. His fatal flaw is probably his fear of weakness, right? Because he doesn't want to be like his father. His father was weak and somewhat lazy, and he never could feed his family that well, and he didn't work hard, and he always owed people money, and he was just not a very upstanding citizen. Whereas Okonkwo works incredibly hard, and has from a young age, because he had to build himself up from nothing. And now Okonkwo is a very successful member of his tribe. And so he has 3 wives, he has large farming holdings, and for somebody in his culture, he's relatively affluent and important. He holds some political power. He's an important person. So that, I think, is one thing to look at that's interesting. You know, when Achebe wrote this book in the 1950s, that seems like a pretty egalitarian society. And certainly Britain and the US in the 50s weren't somewhere where you couldn't rise, from the lower ranks to the upper as far as economically. But I think the idea that Okonkwo was able to accomplish this simply through hard work shows that his society was not one that was quite so rigid. Anyway, let's look at and what else is important from there? You see a lot of different characters. A lot of these names have an E or an O at the beginning, and that I know may get confusing. Some of the consonant combinations are a little confusing, but try to keep them straight. Remember, there were 3 wives. There's Okonkwo, and then some of Okonkwo's friends, and then his sons and daughters. So, look through. You can find charts online that have all the family members listed in a family tree if that's helpful to you. But at this point, we've seen how they resolve things. We've seen some past about Okonkwo, and we've seen how he treats his wives and children too. He's not the nicest guy to his wives and kids. He's not, sadistic or anything, but he's certainly not overly friendly. He has high expectations. He's easily angered. He's sometimes quite unfair. But he does have soft spots for certain people. For example, his second wife's daughter, Enzima, he seems to be very connected to her, and he has a soft spot for her. And also Ikemefuna, his adopted boy, who's living with them. He also likes him quite a bit. He's a hard worker, and so Okonkwo seems to like him too. Anyway, let's look at these questions. So, 1, describe how Achebe characterizes Okonkwo in chapter 1. What kinds of characterization is he using, direct or indirect? What kinds of things is he trying to tell you about him? And that's some of what I've just discussed would certainly apply there, but you can look at other things as well. How does Achebe reveal and develop the theme of identity and or individual and community in the first two chapters of the novel? Choose one and explain. So we talked a little bit about Okonkwo and his identity, and honestly, Achebe even goes through and psychoanalyzes Okonkwo a bit. So you could use that, or you could talk about the community versus the individual and how they balance those. Identify and explain at least one technique Achebe uses to offer perspective of the Igbo people that counters European stereotypes present in books such as Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Now, you haven't read that, but basically in those books, Africans are usually stereotyped as primitive, violent, unintelligent, not good at critical thinking, etc., etc. So, how does this portrayal in some ways go against that? How does it disprove that? In a speech remembering Achebe's accomplishments, the head of the African Union said, Achebe expressed frustration at frequently being misunderstood on this point, saying that I want to scream that things fall apart is on the side of women, and that Okonkwo is paying the penalty for his treatment of women, that all his problems, all the things he did wrong, can be seen as offenses against the feminine. Using what you have read so far, explain how Okonkwo's treatment of women is a symptom of his tragic flaw. So, yeah, remember, we said his tragic flaw might be something to do with fear of weakness. How does that connect with femininity in this culture? How is he demonstrating that through the way that he treats his wives, his daughters, and men that he perceives as feminine? His father, for example. So, that'd be an interesting one to look at. Okonkwo has a fear of being perceived as not masculine enough, which is basically the same as this question. Provide evidence from the novel to support this statement. Very similar questions, so same type of thing. And then reread the first paragraph of the novel. Use evidence from this paragraph and chapter 6 to explain the significance of the wrestling matches to the people of Umuofia, especially the young men. So you're looking kind of at the significance of wrestling culturally, how that connects to people, how it organizes them, how it forms power relations, power structures within their society. So you can look at those two different things. And of course, they're comparing Okonkwo's conquest against the cat in the beginning versus the more current one where Okonkwo is now an important member of the culture and he is no longer one of the young men wrestling. So you would compare those two things. So we'll see where this goes. We obviously have a character here who is very hardworking and very strong and tough, and we'll see how he reacts to colonialism and how he reacts to changes in his society. I will say it's a little more complicated than that. There are more things going on than just him facing the colonial overlords that are coming. So it's an interesting book, and I think you'll see some things that you may not expect coming up in the next few chapters. So for next week, you're reading a few more chapters, and the questions are posted. Keep going. Again, if you are a little late on things, that's okay, but do keep in mind that by the end of May, I forget if it's the 27th or 29th, I pretty much need everything done so that I can update your grades because I have to upload grades shortly after that. And again, your grades are just going to be pass or excused, but I need to make sure that everything's in so I know whether to give you a passed or excused. So, anyway, hope you're doing well, and if anybody has any questions, get in touch. I'm around. Thanks.